You say?
Let's
Who's
do
ready?
it.
Who's ready to dive in? I'm ready to dive in. So, what I want to talk about first is I want to talk about why we are here, who we have. So we have some of the ultimate things. Jay already told you a little bit about him. So he has a huge background inside fitness, inside performance, working with people at a very very high level. So this is high performance mental skills coaching, you guys. Tarek, this is Tarek over
Yeah.
here, my main man. He is the owner of FTI. For those of you who don't know what FTI is, it is the Functional Training Institute based out of, it's out of Australia, right, Tarek?
We came out of Australia. Yes.
Came out of Australia. And now he helps all different types of trainers, coaches with functional training and so much more, which he's going to be able to dive into in here. So, Tarek, if you want to start off kind of like just telling everybody a
Sure.
little bit about you, then we can kind of jam into the main workshop.
Yeah, definitely. So I've been around since, well, this company, FTI, since 2009 from Sydney originally. And we had interest Australia-wide and then into Asia, Middle East, and other parts of the world. So our programs primarily focus in on three sections of offerings, which is the functional line, injury prevention rehab, and then the mental skills, which we partnered with Jay and his company on. So we're very collaborative and innovative in terms of our education for a number of professionals, including fitness pros, sports coaches, wellness, etc. So yeah, we're here to really be groundbreaking and go really deep in education because we do still strongly believe in that. And all of the stuff we do is very, very pragmatic for a range of coaches across the field of performance and fitness. So looking forward to diving in more deeply. And if you wanted to check more about me on LinkedIn, do so. Reach out to me, and I'd be happy to connect further with each of you.
Perfect. And Anita just typed in Anita. She typed in her information, but whereabouts are you from, Anita? So everybody knows.
I'm from the Chicagoland area.
From Chicago, Chi-Town, where the best pizza in the world is from. New Yorkers would actually disagree, but I like Chicago pizza.
I think Boston's a little bit better than
Yeah.
that.
So,
I like both. I'm
so
more of a
welcome.
New
Yes.
York person.
Yeah.
The pizza.
Glad to have you in here, Anita. So really cool. Why are you guys here? So let me know. Let me know in the comments. What's one thing that you would like to get out of this workshop? Would you like to improve your coaching skills? Would you like to improve yourself as far as mental clarity? Would you like to work on what's one thing that you want to be able to pull out of today's workshop, you guys?
In the
All
chat
right.
or just out loud?
Anita, learn from you. Linda, sharper mental skills. Awesome. And obviously, we want to go over teaching the power of setting clear, actionable goals. And there's going to be a lot of different cool things that we're going to do. We're going to break into little groups and do some really cool coaching breakout rooms and things that you're going to be able to see in here. And if you stay around to the end, we're also going to have some little giveaways and some things in here too. So we're going to have a weekly content machine. We're going to have a monthly social media planner. There's going to be some other things that we're going to give. Noah, always looking to grow. Tobias is the best. Oh, thank you, Noah. I appreciate you, dude. I'll pay you your $20 later. Just kidding. Well, let's start off. Let's start off with kind of diving in with the mental challenges that you guys are facing in your coaching journey. You guys, what are some of the mental things that you guys are facing where you're like, ah, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it over to some of these experts in here, Tarek and Jay, and they're going to be able to dive in and go a little bit deeper. But what is that? What's the biggest mental challenge that you guys are having when it comes to your coaching?
And we want you to ground today in something real for yourself. So what are you challenged with when you're working with clients? What do you become challenged with within yourself in your own mental well-being? And what do your clients struggle with? So it can be really an answer to any of those three questions, so that we can ground it in something real for you.
Yes. To piggyback, are you having a hard time getting them to adhere, to follow their nutrition plans, to actually implement anything, to communicate with you? to get the workouts in, what are the things? So Andrew says capacity. So handling speed while still being able to slow down for other team members. Oh, I like good stuff. How about you all? Anita, Linda, Yaya, Jack, Noah. What are some of the challenges that you're facing with yourself, with some clients? And then I'm going to turn it over to the man.
You could just share with us rather than writing it in the chat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, Andrew, if you could elaborate more. So that capacity and handling speed, is that without having any time for reflection?
That's one way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm in an interesting spot because I have a full-time day job. I actually have two startups. So Pose is one of the things. I founded it, and then I'm involved in another company that I'm a founder of as well. And so I have like team members on all fronts. I have to maintain good work at a full-time job, and I'm one of those people who likes to run at top speed, and not everybody likes that. So whenever I come at people with top speed, it creates more frustration than it does help. So I have to try to figure out how to throttle back when I need to and communicate effectively, but also, still hit goals and still move quickly. So it's been a kind of present challenge right now. We just got into our software development process to get this app out into the market. And so I have a whole new team that I'm working with that's a vendor. And that kind of same principle applies across the board.
Very cool.
Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, it says starting a fitness page online while juggling the college life. Yeah, you want to elaborate on that a little bit? You can unmute if you're able to.
So yeah, I'm in college right now, but one of my plans is to start like a business and fitness. I haven't started yet though. Still
Okay.
yeah.
All right. So getting in the beginning stages. Cool. I love it. Yeah. And that's something that we've all been there. And it's scary in the beginning because you're starting something brand new and you're like, where do I start? Where do I go? What do I do? How do I coach? Right? Because sometimes it's a whole different ballgame coaching clients rather than used to coaching yourself, because you can be the best adherence type person in the world. And then you work with clients and they're like, they're not adhering to what I'm doing. That's what this workshop is all about. So we're going to help you with that. Good stuff. Anybody else? Anybody else have any challenges?
I think, let's see, I put this, finding clients that have a strong enough why.
Yes. Gotcha. Getting in there. So it's just kind of just surface area clients that you're getting. They're just like, if I can get in shape, I will. If not, Okay. Gotcha.
And so Noah, I'm guessing that they lose motivation. Their motivation goes up and down given that.
Exactly. Whether it be, personal, financial, just goes back and forth between the two. It's just sometimes it's a juggle, and then they have to have support from their loved ones as well. Always, personal trainers are not just personal trainers anymore, or fitness coaches. We are therapists. We're pretty much everything, as you know, Tobias.
Mm-hmm.
Life coaches too.
What's that?
Life coaches as well.
Exactly.
Yeah. Therapists, psychologists, everything. Yeah. I remember when I was doing personal training, I was like, man, with some of my clients, like they didn't even come there to work out. They just came to get a psychologist session. And I was like, oh my gosh, they wanted to be able to go over all their problems. So Tarek, I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to you, my friend. Let me know when you want to me to share the slides and I will dive into that.
Yeah, thank you all for sharing. We'll dive more deeply into such sharings and more. So, Tobias, if you don't mind sharing the slides,
sure.
And I think Jay will begin the show, and I'll dive in accordingly.
So yeah, thank you very much for sharing. Those are relatively common challenges that people have, and we find that coaches have in relationship to their clients. And we're going to talk to each of those points. So in terms of juggling different things, you're talking about priorities, and in terms of your clients finding their why, Noah, you're talking about intentionality. And so we're going to talk about the importance of those in terms of driving the mind toward where it is we want the client's mind and indeed our mind to go. And so mental skills is all about understanding how the mind works on the inside, how we go about the process of processing information. In high performance, the problem is very, very rarely ever out here. Although, most clients, most athletes will point out here and say, out here is where the problem is. It's very rarely out here. Usually it's in here, about out here, in terms of how we're processing. And how we process is we process through biases. Those biases are called our thinking patterns or our thinking strategies, and they determine how we think, and that how we think determines what we attend to. And so when we do work with mental skills, we're not looking at remediating anything. So we aren't therapists. We don't get into therapy. We aren't psychologists. We're developmental psychologists, which is very, very different from clinical psychologists. A psychologist has a very specific job to do, which is to resolve and fix hurts and ailments and stuff from the past. We are about how the person is generating their thinking now and how they're projecting that onto their performance now and in the future, or maybe how they're referencing the past now and how it's affecting their performance now and in the future. And so we're really about unlocking the mental challenges that people have that stop them from performing at the level that they can and need to in order to step up to the next level of their fitness, of their well-being, of their health, or of their athletic performance. And so that really today is all about. So we're going to look at, you've given us some challenges. Let's skip forward a couple of slides, Tobias, to some challenges that we experience. Keep going. Do we experience that coaches face, Tarek?
You'd go back, Tobias. Yeah, so there's a few that we'll rattle off here. Certainly it's these are the common ones, and there might be some commonalities that you guys are experiencing with such challenges here. So inconsistent attendance, clients or athletes skipping sessions, and it's usually more the client's adherence. Those who have either worked in high performance space, there are different levels of motivation, whether it's monetary or winning a tournament versus your everyday client who has a whole host of other challenges, such as work commitments, family, and so just as it was said earlier, it's your strong enough why. And certainly if we could elicit or work in with our clients to understand their why, they can overcome any how, as the saying goes. And so such things as skipping sessions or not sticking to their routines, really you need to sort of taper back and go, if they don't have their why or their purpose instilled, you're not going to get these things, because you could try all of the tactics possible to try to get them to attend. That's going to fall by the wayside, because in the end they need to be internally motivated as opposed to extrinsically. And that it includes motivation, commitment, and understanding on your part as much as the client. So really getting that sort of rapport early on will help to instill a sense of consistency of attending sessions. I myself had gone through this, and I'm sure those of you who are on this call, where it's kind of thinking, well, the clients had a good start, they're attending the first few weeks, and then there's a drop off, and that's what typically happens. And so we need to mitigate that, and we'll talk more about some strategies to help overcome that inconsistency, which means inconsistent income, particularly for the newer trainers or coaches out there. Number two is the unrealistic expectations. This one is clients expecting quick results, and that's again early on in the phase of training without understanding the process. So, Jay talks about this a lot as agreements, which are important, and we don't mean sort of legal agreements. These are transcend that in terms of the trust between the client and the coach. So, you know, having basic agreements out there, such as what Covey talks about as win-win agreements, is really crucial, because you get the buy-in of that client through these agreements, as opposed to you know, this level of compliance that's imposed by you, for example, as the coach. So, you know, these adherence, these agreements, I certainly have tried these in the past, and they have worked, because then you can start to work through those inconsistencies in attendance, for example. So really, attendance, the foundation is laying out those agreements, which means what are their expectations, what's in it for them, what's in it for you, and you start to work through specifics that based on a win-win. Number 3 is you know, for example, this is quite specific, would be poor nutrition habits, struggling to get clients to follow dietary recommendations, lack of knowledge, ignorance, laziness, which becomes a lack of priority. So, you know, whether it's movement habits, some of you are wellness coaches, and you may focus more on the nutrition element, or breath work, or whatever it is, the certain strategies that we use as fitness, health, wellness professionals. It's really kind of getting that consistency in place, and you know, we'll dive more into specifics around that. But habit formation is crucial in the face of these challenges that typically we as coaches will face getting adherence with clients. Number 4 is a lack of communication. And again, this is a huge component of what we teach in the mental skills. And that's anything to do about understanding, going back to the unrealistic expectations in point 2, for example, would hinder lines of communication. So misunderstandings about goals, their progress, or program adjustments, and really sort of losing sight of that. I know, Andrew, you said earlier that you work at such a speed, and it's quite common to not actually reflect and sit down with a client, even be it for 3 or 5 minutes, and get some feed forward from them, so then you can then give the feedback, the objectivity element. So again, this ties back into points 1, 2, and 3. It sort of like builds into these layers in terms of these challenges. And 5, resistance to change, clients being hesitant to try new exercises or techniques. And this kind of cuts both ways, because if the coach, you know, lacks the knowledge or the depth to sort of tweak or change things, be it a session, or be it habit formation, you know, you need to be agile as a coach, for example, to be able to understand the client's needs in a real sort of subtle way, rather than always being adding a new flavor to their routines. And that could be a sudden and abrupt change that actually they're going to kind of retract and go, well, I don't want that now. So really micro doses of change are far better than you just abruptly changing a routine or a habit. And again, that's a really important point here. So that being said, really understanding the client's motives is so important to understanding how much of that change you can apply, and that micro doses are very important here. So there's some of those common challenges, and there's certainly many more, and perhaps some of you have already experienced these as well.
And the final point, secondary gain, is really how the human mind works. That you know, there is a developmental rule, if you like, for the way in which we think. And that is, even in our dysfunction, there's functionality. So when clients show up and they resist change, for example, they resist pushing themselves outside of their comfort zone, it's understanding that there's likely a positive intention for doing that, even though they're experiencing negative performance, even though it's not working for them. The intention in and of itself of the resistance for the person is positive. Maybe it's self-protection. Maybe it's so that they won't fail, for example. You know, if I don't put in all the effort, then I can't fail. Those secondary gains run in the back of the mind, and they will often transmute the primary gains that the client is looking for, because they're unconscious, they're not conscious. And so part of the mental skills is getting to the stuff that stops us from being effective, that stops us from achieving what we consciously say we want to achieve, but we unconsciously resist. And so today we're going to talk a lot about how the mind works and how we as coaches can get into it quite simply from a generative, not a remedial perspective, but from a generative perspective. And so let's slow that down a little bit. Your thoughts on this, and is this relevant for you so far?
Well, I'll just say this is your number one issue there was inconsistent attendance, and that is 100% what I'm dealing with right now. So, and coming into this, I've already learned something actually from Tobias, seeing those reminders on specific times and dates ahead of the appointments. And I just like a little more information on whether or not that is like a pre-programmed, is there a program that does that for you automatically? Do you have that built in, or is there something that you're doing, yourself, is that self-generated? So we'll talk about that, I'm sure.
Yeah, for me, I have automations that are built in to do those things, because you're going to want to have that for your clients in there too. So whether it's for showing up for an appointment where you want to make sure that they get in. So an hour before, you're going to give them, something, or maybe you give them some testimonials, after they book the initial appointment. All those things you're going to want to do, but you can automate that process. But as far as coaching your clients, like, that's going to be practical to today's workshop, then you can also build out automations and workflows for habit coaching. You can create automations and workflows, for reminders on filling out their nutrition, like all things to help you do your job, things that you would normally coach your clients on and say to your clients and send a message on. And after, a day of working with them, you're going to say, hey, we're a day in. I just want to say, hey, I'm super excited to be working with you. And if you haven't already done this, upload your progress photos or whatever you want to do. All that stuff can be automated, because you don't want to have to manually do all that stuff, especially when you really grow and scale. And that can help out with what kind of we're talking about with some of the challenges that you're facing. If your clients are not adhering, they're not doing the things. Sometimes we forget to put in the reminders on things in there too. So just want to throw that in there. Yes, then you can automate all that stuff. Yeah, great point.
Yeah.
So let's get into it. We've got 8 points of high performance mental skills we'd like to talk through in understanding how both your and your clients' minds work in how to address some of these challenges for yourself. And so the number one is that you are a neurosemantic class of life. And you may have heard people say that what sets us apart as human beings is that we are meaning makers. We make meaning. And so in high performance coaching, we say the problem's never the problem. And what that means is the presenting problem that the person is having, whether it's motivation, whether it's a lack of priority, whether it's a fear of failure, whether it's a fear of getting outside of their comfort zone, etc. It's about the meaning that they're making and bringing to their performance. And so once we understand that we are the meaning makers, we can understand that even though the problem seems to be out here, it's always in here about how we're thinking about out here. And so as a neurosemantic class of life, neuro means your neurology, semantics means how you make meaning. Then your meaning drives into your neurology and drives your emotions. You literally have to think something before you feel something. Your emotions can then flip back onto your thinking and start to drive your thinking, because your thinking is grounded in your emotions. But the generator of your emotions is your thinking. And so as a neurosemantic class of life, we don't take the world in directly. We process it and we filter it through our biases, our mental biases. And so each of you have biases. Andrew, would you like me to feed back a couple of your biases?
Go for it.
So one of the key biases that you run is called options over procedures. I can hear it in your language. And so you say you like to move fast. My guess is you jump from one thing to another thing because your mind is really good at seeing how everything fits together. I can hear that you're quite visual in your processing as well. And I can hear that visual aligned with options. I can hear you're future oriented. So when you're thinking about how what you're thinking now is grounded in the future. You're constantly thinking about what's ahead. Am I right?
Yeah, pretty much.
So that those biases are in your language. They're right there. And so one of the things in mental skills is we teach coaches how to listen, not listen to what's being said, to listen to what's being communicated, but not being said. So all of the suppositions in language, all of the physiology that is in our communication, that denotes where we're thinking from. You know, the stuff up the back of the mind, the prior intentions of mind. And so when we can hear that, we can have very, very different conversations with people because we can talk about what's going on for them on the inside about the outside. And that's where we can really unlock their motivational blockages. We can really unlock the stuff that holds them back that they're not particularly conscious of. Point two is that the meaning, and given we're meaning makers, drives performance, period. So what does that mean? It means that we engage in things that are meaningful for us. If we're not engaging, or somebody or the client is not engaging, what they're actually communicating at the meta level is at some level that's not as important as other things. So our human mind, for the average human being, works in hierarchies of importance. And so we have, we might call them priorities, but we have a different hierarchy of priorities. Our highest level priorities are the things that are most unconscious to us. And so most people are not consciously actually aware of what their highest priority is. And I'll give you an example in this business, in this industry, is that comfort and remaining in a comfort zone and being comfortable with what I'm doing is usually when people don't want to change, when they don't want to try something new, when they really struggle with ambiguity. What they're actually communicating is actually they're quite comfortable in their comfort zone, and that's a priority for them over and above getting uncomfortable and earning the benefits of that discomfort. And we know that as fitness professionals, if people are going to get fit, they're going to get uncomfortable at some point. Yeah, you cannot get fit without getting uncomfortable because you quite literally got to take your body outside of its comfort zone. And so exercise and fitness and working with, for example, rugby teams in preseason at the highest level, I was always surprised when high performance rugby players a third of the way through preseason would go, "Oh my God, I don't know how many more of these I can take." Like it's a hard thing to go through a big preseason because you're taking your body from being unconditioned to being really high performance conditioned, and it is uncomfortable. The thing that stops people from wanting to get into that space to take themselves to where they want to go to achieve their goals, as Tobias said earlier, is to get uncomfortable. But they might have a prior intention of staying comfortable that they're not aware of. And as soon as they get uncomfortable, their whole system goes, I am just that this is not what I signed up for. This is not what I would. And so their whole body resists and starts to run their mind. And so then they start contracting, and that's when the inconsistency will show up. That's when the misunderstandings will show up, etc. And so understanding how to help your clients create the meanings that drive the level of performance that they need to achieve their goals is critical in managing the mental side of performance. The third one is quite simply a way of thinking and a way of understanding how feedback works. Many people, for example, resist feedback. They don't like it. They take it as criticism. They take it personally. And the reason that they take it personally is because they've mixed up two things. They've mixed up their confidence with their esteem. And they try to esteem themselves through what they do, rather than that esteem being a given. Confidence should go up and down. Esteem should not go up and down. Esteem is your self-worth, your sense of self. Confidence is about your skills, your capacities, and your abilities. It should go up and down as your skills go up and down. And so confidence should be low where skills low. You wouldn't go to a doctor who had a high level of confidence but low level of skill. That would be frightening. You wouldn't go to a doctor that had a high level of skill and a low level of confidence. That would be frightening. You want confidence to track with skill. And so in order for that to happen, the average human being needs to get themselves and their sense of self and their self-worth out the way, so that they can work on getting feedback on their skills from you, the professional. And so to do that, we need to be able to help our client understand the difference between how their self-value sits in an unconditioned way, that it doesn't go up and down. We know that, for example, does anybody have kids here? Anybody have children? So you know, if we were to rate a child that was just born as we rate ourselves, i.e., I am what I do. If I perform, I feel really good about myself. If I don't perform, I feel really shit about myself. If we were to bring that to our children can't do anything. They can't be anything. They can't have anything. They have no status, no ownership. By the standards that most people hold themselves, we would say that child is worthless. And we absolutely know that's not the truth. We know that child is a miracle. That child is each of us. Our esteem, our humanity is our value. We don't have to earn it. And so really understanding that, to be able to separate our esteem as a given from our confidence, so that we can work on what it takes to start to get confidence and build confidence in, and our skills in fitness or high performance, is an essential element of high performance. And so there's no failure, because failure is what's called a nominalization. That means it's a verb, to fail, that has been turned into a noun, but it's not a real noun. It's not like that. It's not a pen. That's a real noun. Failure isn't a real noun. It's a conceptual noun, a pseudo noun. And so you can't put it in a wheelbarrow or take it to the park and kick it around with the kids, because it doesn't actually exist. And so we turn it back into a verb. So we go, what are you failing to do? Not, you know, why do you consider yourself a failure? Because a failure doesn't exist. So we like to say that in order to transmute that, we turn failure into feedback. And so you can't fail except to listen to the feedback and to look at, what did you learn in failing to get where you wanted to get? Success is absolutely, a failure is a prerequisite of success. You can't have success without failing at something. And that takes us to point 4, which is, it's not what happens to us that defines us, but how we respond to what happens that defines us. And we're going to talk about in a little bit, we're going to talk about a responsibility model, which is very, very powerful for your client, because it helps them understand what they can take responsibility for and what they cannot take responsibility for, what's within their power and what's not within their power. And just separating that for the average human being gives them an immense amount of ownership and self-responsibility for stepping up and doing what they can do and letting go of what they don't have power over. And so our response in the world is where our power is. And so with athletes, I'll often say, do you have power over the weather? And they'll say, no, we don't. And I'll say, do you have power over the umpire or the referee? And they'll say, no, we don't. I'll say, do you have power over, the opposition? And they'll say, well, no, we don't. We only in how we respond to them. Do you have power over your own team members? No, we don't. Do you have power over the crowd? No, we don't. What do you have power over? And there are 4 things. What you think drives your emotions. So you have power over what you think. You have power, therefore, over the emotions that you generate. What you say, communicate verbally and not verbally, and what you do. So your power actually ends at your nose and your toes. Everything else is influence. And the way we get influence is when we go back to where our power is and take responsibility for that. That allows us to show up and respond to what's happening out here in reality, the event. And so no matter what's happening out here, our power isn't governing what's happening out here, it's responding with it and responding to it. And so that's what we mean by point 4. So before we jump into the second 8, how are those principles of high performance and building a high performance mental attitude landing for you? What are your thoughts around those? Let's slow it down a little bit. What questions do you have?
I like the confidence and esteem trade-off. I've used the word ego before in some past experiences, and I've lost team members over that challenge. So it's interesting to try and realize, like, okay, we want to maintain somebody's esteem even if the confidence feels like it's low. Because when it comes into business and having hard conversations with people, it's easy to get critical. It's easy to get potentially offensive, and we don't want to do that. So is there a way to help encourage and maintain the esteem while also helping build up the confidence if it's low, instead of just being like, hey, let me blow this thing up?
Yeah. Thank you very much, Andrew. Others?
What do you think, you guys? I thought it was pretty powerful just knowing that, like, the power of your influence, like, hey, you don't have the power over anything else, over the crowd, over anybody else, but yourself and what you say, what you do, and everything else is kind of an influence in there. It's so freaking powerful when you like really think about those things in there too. And other people don't have power over you. That's the thing too. Like, you control your own emotions.
Yeah.
Right. You can't say, oh, this person made me feel like shit, or this person made me feel like crap. You allowed it to happen. You did. If somebody could say something completely rude to you, and you can be like, oh, thank you, have a nice day. And you cannot let it control you. It's just those kind of things in there are just so cool. Jay, I'm loving what you're jamming on, man.
It's really how you respond to it, to every action or reaction to everything. Because the thing is, you can just, you can love your client so much, but the thing is, unless they're really going to make those changes, you can't force them to do what they don't want to do either. So it's like they can only do what they feel like they're ready to do, and that's what it comes back to, is accountability and everything else as well. So
yeah, absolutely, Noah. So people process reality through their beliefs, their values, their identity structures. They process reality through their thinking biases. And so what they receive of what's happening in reality and how they make sense of it is based on those things. And when they react to a situation, then often what's happening is a belief's being fired, or a values being fired, or an identity structure's being fired in the face of the event. And so Tobias said before, no one can make you angry. That's actually true. What happens is a behavior or an event occurs out here. It hits one of our values gets violated, our value gets violated, and that violation drives our reaction. And it looks like what you did made me angry, but actually it's the value that's firing over and above any rational thought about that, i.e. it's my value. I don't expect you to value it. I value it. Why am I getting upset because you've broken my value? we don't get that rational realization in the moment. Our value fires and we react. And now we react with emotion based on that, or that belief, or that identity structure. And so we as human beings, we don't actually directly interface with reality. We run a movie in our head that drives our emotional experience. It's the movie and how we code the movie that drives the emotional experience, not the event. When we can help our clients and our athletes really understand that, they begin to genuinely understand where their power is and where their focus needs to be and what it is they really need to attend to, which we'll get to later on, which is being damned intentional and knowing why you are doing what you're doing. What's important to you about that? And so I will put that question back to you in mere moments, particularly about your businesses, and particularly about being really, really clear in the building of your business. What is the most important thing for you? What is most of a priority for you? That why that drives what you're doing. Because when that's really clear, the troubles that you experience out here in engaging in the building of your business become a choice. And because they're a choice, you'll happily engage in them because your intention is greater in terms of your meaning making than the problems you're facing. And so it's the same with an athlete, being intentional and being connected to what's most important to me and why am I doing what I'm doing. I'll give you an example. Our why took myself and my business partner 9 years to find. Every single week, we would come together on a Monday morning, and his first question would be, why do we exist? What is our why? And I'd rattle off, new thoughts and we exist for this, and we exist to help people for that, and this. And he said, that's not why we exist. Why do we exist? And so we sat with this question, constantly batting it backwards and forwards. And I was in the shower one day and I was listening to the radio, and there's a mathematician here in Australia who was a comedian who was running a radio show. And he was talking about how many people are going to be on the planet in 2050. And it was something like 30 billion. And I was gobsmacked. I stopped in the shower and I was like, how many people? And then he went through the continents and how many people are going to be on each of the continents as projected. And I thought to myself, you know what? We might not make it. The amount of disparity, the amount of conflict in our world with, at that point, shy of 7 billion, how are we going to handle 30 billion? How is 30 billion of us going to get along if we can't handle 6 or 7 billion of us? And so I got out, I toweled myself off, I picked up the phone and I said, I've got it. I know what our why is. And my business partner said, what's our why? And I said, to end psychological human suffering one conversation at a time so that we can do 4 things. Wake up to how our personality, our ego, if you like, Andrew, runs us, how our habits run us, to grow up, to expand the amount of perspectives we can take on reality so we have more choice and can make more informed, more powerful decisions, so that we can start to clean up and do the work we need to do to wake ourselves up and grow ourselves up, so that we can start to show up. That is why we are here. And he sat at the end of the phone and there was silence, and he said, yep, I think we've got it. I think we have. And so that is our why. That is why we do. Now, I coach on average, whether it's athletes or high performance leaders, I coach on average 10 people a day. And people say to me, how can you coach 10 people back to back in a day? And it's like, well, it's a lot easier than gardening. It's a lot easier than your jobs, which is running courses and programs. That's a lot of effort, right? You've got a lot of movement going on. I haven't got a lot of movement going on. It's actually pretty easy. And it's easy because I'm constantly connected to that why. And that's true for your customers and it's true for you. And that's what intentionality is about being connected consciously with what's most important to you and allowing to flow through what it is you do. That is one of the high performance indicators. If you are doing that, if your people are doing that, your performance will grow exponentially as a result.
Fantastic.
Any other questions or thoughts? Go.
Can you say your why again, like just concisely in one sentence?
Yeah. So one conversation at a time to help end unnecessary psychological suffering. Yeah.
Great.
Physiological suffering, Andrew, is a given. Psychological suffering is not a given. We don't need to suffer psychologically. And so our job is to help people realize how they're suffering themselves, to wake them up, to grow them up so that they can clean up, so that they can fully show up. That's our why.
That's awesome.
One conversation at a time.
That's awesome.
And this is one of those conversations.
Bam. I love it. I love it. We're getting deep here, folks. All right. Well, without further ado, if anybody has any questions, raise your hand. I'll call on you. Otherwise, we're going to continue with the prism. All right. Let's jam. Let's keep it rocking here. Go to the next slide for you.
So the next one is to say it the way you want it. And what this is pointing at is it's pointing at that you are part of your semantics or meaning making is what's called linguistics. And so you are a linguistic class of life, that the way in which you make meaning is through language. But that language is not your own. You were given it. You were given not only the language, but you were given the meanings that you appropriate to that language. And so you are enculturated through language. When you learned language, culture is wired into the language that you learned. And there are many, many different cultures. So saying it the way you want it is understanding how language works in our semantic system, in that your mind cannot process a negation. And so let me show you what that means. Are you ready? Right now, don't think of an orange spotted elephant. Bugger. To process what I just said, you have to think about it. And that's how your mind works. It can't process a negation. It has to turn it into a positive in order to understand it and then negate it and then go, don't do that. But actually, we've already sent our mind in the wrong direction. We've already sent our mind where we don't want to go. And so that's how the human mind works. And so language really matters in communication. When we're communicating, we've got to say it the way we want it, not the way we don't want it. Because if we say it the way we don't want it, we're sending people in the wrong direction. Let me give you an example. I was working with a high-performance first-tier rugby team here in Australia. The coach at halftime, the team I'm working with is behind by 7 points. The coach says these words to the players, and it's meant to be inspirational. And he says, scoreboard pressure, scoreboard pressure. I want you to go out there and apply scoreboard pressure. Now that's ringing in the athlete's ears, right? Scoreboard pressure, scoreboard pressure. And they go out and the other team scores first. What's happened to the scoreboard pressure? It's coming back on them, right? Yeah. And so we got beaten. We got beaten by 30 points. And I walked into the dressing room. It was like a mortuary, and I grabbed the coach and I went, "What, how you going?" And he goes, "I don't understand what happened." And I said, "I've got 3 words for you, buddy. Are you ready for them?" He said, "Yep." I said, "Scoreboard pressure." He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "You gave them meaning that worked against them? Did you intend to put pressure on them? And he said, shit, I didn't realize. I said, you sent them to the outcome and therefore outcome thinking rather than sending them to the process on what they needed to do in order to build that pressure. You sent them straight to the outcome. And so their mind stuck on the outcome. So now they're playing scoreboard rugby and they're behind on the scoreboard, which means that they become more and more pressured, not less. And so that's how language works. And then the sixth one is high quality communication involves communication loops. So many of you will have heard that the majority of our communication is nonverbal. That's both true and not true. It's kind of been debunked and it kind of hasn't. But high quality communication involves both verbal and nonverbal communication. And so it involves loops. And that's why we call listening active listening, because listening is not a passive process. It's an active process. It's a process of feeding back what we've heard and checking in on what meanings are associated with some of the words that seem ambiguous in what we've heard. In order to clarify and check in, we must be looping our communication backwards and forwards. Otherwise, what happens is we get into projecting mind reads. And mind reading is the cancer of communicating because we project our meaning making onto their behaviors. And so where we come out of that is where we actually engage in communications, and Tarek was talking about agreements earlier on, and we create agreement-based understandings. Then we're sending our communication in the right direction and we're focusing on what we can control. The seventh one is the meaning of your communication is the response you get. And so this one is really about ownership and responsibility, that you can only be responsible for what you're communicating. And so you can't be responsible actually for how it's perceived, but how it's perceived in terms of how people feed back actually gives you more information on what you actually communicated, regardless of what you intended to communicate. And so that's what was received. So that's what was communicated. That gives us a lot of power in communication, because now if we want a different response, it's us who needs to change the way in which we're communicating until we get that response. And so it actually gives us power in communicating. Is if we don't get the response we want, it's us who needs to adjust it until we do. And this is the differences in how meaning is constructed and applied. Is we communicate through our meanings, and that communication is received through their meanings. It's only when we get a reaction from them that we understand how they're making meaning. The moment we understand how they're making meaning, we can change the nature of our communicating to communicate inside of their meaning-making structures. That gives us a lot of influence in how we engage and communicate. And then the last one, number 8, is about setting the outcome and focusing on the process, which is process versus outcome thinking. And I kind of addressed that in point 5. So again, over to you. What are your thoughts on that? How does that land for you? Any questions on that before we jump into the responsibility model?
So good, right, you guys? Because if you think about coaching your clients and if you're having a hard time with adherence, then what Jay just said makes complete sense. If you think about a client that struggles with something, let's just say they love gummy bears, right? Let's just say that's their pitfalls, gummy bears. And you're like, stop having gummy bears. What are they going to think about? Gummy bears. They think about that, right? But then they know, stop. But instead, if you focus on what I want you to do is fill up with, these things, you give them what you want them to do instead of the thing that you don't, if that makes sense, right? If you're driving and you're driving at nighttime, and let's just say I have a 16-year-old daughter, she's just learning how to drive. And if I'm like, stop looking at the lights as they're coming into you, what's she going to do? She's going to start looking at the lights and get blinded, right? Instead, if I was to say, hey, as cars are coming, focus on the right, look to the right, look to the outside. She's going to do that. So she's going to do the right thing. So guide them by not telling them, like, don't do this, guide them on what to do. So complete sense, Jay. I love it. Does that make sense to you guys? How you can effectively take this and you can utilize it for your coaching, for your clients, habit coaching? Good. Any of you guys have any feedback, any questions so far?
What I will add is that it's, and Jay talked about this in terms of finding his or the coaching room's why. And what's important here is it's a journey, and oftentimes, particularly with clients more so than with athletes, because you often have sort of definitive markers and often periodized programming, for example. Whereas with clients, it could be, and this is where setting the expectations, going back to point 2, is so important, is because if you set the expectations that they're going to lose weight and change habits within 3 months, well, maybe the weight will be dropped, but most likely the habits won't be formed. So it's kind of interesting to kind of take that client, particularly on a journey, and really not be caught up in timeframes. So I think setting that expectation, if it is that they can train with you for 3 months, then there's stuff that you need to do to achieve that amount of time as a journey, rather than thinking about the outcome, as Carol Dweck would say in her book. So that process, which means there's a bi-directional relationship between, as Jay was saying earlier, around those points of communication that kind of bridge the gap of misunderstandings. So really what's important here is thinking about that journey, whether it's, initially 3 months with that client, can then become over many years, an incredible journey and relationship and transformation in different phases. And so I really want to encourage those, I mean, even including myself, to not be impatient and to treat that as a process, whether it's a small time frame that can then convert into many flourishing years with that client. So I wanted to really add that. And as my good friend would say, Nick Winkelman, attention is a limited resource capacity. However, we can start to kind of build more levels of attention and their capacity to be able to absorb more by being focused in on whether it's task-based, or whether it's habit formation. So there's some things there to ponder and consider, folks.
Some good stuff. Good stuff. Let's keep the ball rolling here. Let's go to the next slide here.
So the four powers model gives us a really powerful way of understanding how to lead ourselves and how to take ownership, responsibility for ourselves. And that includes letting go of what's not within our power. So we actually can't impact how other people think and feel. We can only impact how we think and feel. We only have power over that. We can influence how other people think and feel by focusing on how we drive our own thinking. In neuroscience, there's things called mirror neurons. Have you ever heard of them? Ever heard of mirror neurons? They are unique to us as primates. So they only exist in primate-based mammals. And that is that we unconsciously, and this is because of verbal, non-verbal language and the structure of how our brain works, we unconsciously model each other. We are relational beings. And so like all primates are relational beings, we unconsciously relate with one another. And so the interesting thing for those of you who have kids, who've brought up kids, I mean, that's the ultimate mirror. Yeah, they are unconsciously modeling the hell out of you and then presenting you back to you. And when you bother yourself with that, you're bothering yourself with you because they modeled you. You can see it when you go into a supermarket and, a child's having a meltdown and a parent might be yelling at the child having a meltdown. And, you from the third person perspective go, well, it's quite obvious that the child is modeling you and giving you back, but the parent can't see it in that moment. And that's each of us. We all have blind spots. We can't see what we can't see, except when we see it in others. And so part of growth and development is understanding how those mirror neurons work and how we model each other. And if we want to influence other people, actually the change has got to happen here in order for it to start showing up here. Relationships are a dynamic interplay. And so if you want to impact relationships, here's where it needs to start, not there. But yet most people, whether it's business relationships, whether it's professional relationships, personal relationships, social relationships, most people want to go change other people. But it's us who actually needs to change, because we're in a relationship dynamic. When we change, the dynamic has to change to keep up. It cannot not, because we're relational beings. So this model is about how do you take responsibility for yourself in order to influence others. And so it first starts with how and what you think, the movies that you run in your mind, and your self-talk. Does each of you talk to yourself in your head? And if you're wondering, what do you mean talk to myself in your head? That's the voice I'm pointing at, right? Do each of you talk to yourself in your head? Is there a little conversation that happens in there? Do you know what that's about? Do you know why you do that? That wasn't a rhetorical question. That was an actual question. Do you know why?
Why?
You know why?
Why, Jay?
It's called your superego, and your superego is part of your growing up process. Your superego is your self-parenting. What you did when you were about 6 or 7 developmentally is you took that moral imperative from one of your parents or both of your parents, you changed it into your voice, and you began to parent yourself. That's part of the maturation process, and it's part of the separation process of separating ourselves from our parents to grow ourselves up as an individual human being. That self-talk is there to guide your moral decisions. And so it's your moral imperative, and it's there to grow you up. But we never get taught about what superego is, what its purpose is. And so we never get taught that actually we can control it. And so it runs us, it runs our motivation, it runs how we experience things, it runs how we react to things, it runs the movies that we make in our head, which runs our emotions. And so a big part of mental performance is understanding how we can run our self-talk to run ourselves more effectively, to generate the kind of emotions that are resourceful in the moment rather than unresourceful in the moment, because it's your emotions that are motivating you. And your emotions are doing 2 things. They're moving you toward what you want, and they're moving you away from what you don't want. And they're going in one of those 2 directions. All emotions are about getting away from something or moving towards something. And so your self-talk runs your movies, runs your emotions, that governs your motivation. So if your clients are unmotivated, it's not because of what's happening out here. It's because of how they're running their self-talk in here, which runs the movies in their head, which runs the emotions, that runs the level of up and down motivation that they experience. When we understand that, we can start to talk with them about the kind of self-talk that they're running, for example, and we can help them reframe their self-talk to be able to send their mind to where they want it to go, not to where they don't want it to go, for example, which is what Tobias was talking about before. And then we've got the third point of the 4 powers model, which is what you communicate. And so you communicate verbally, and you communicate non-verbally. And often incongruence is in between the 2. And incongruence means that there's something happening in their motivation system. So incongruence looks like this. So I'll see you next week. Yeah, that'd be great. Did you catch that? That'd be great. So this is a communication. And you hear, and you're a verbal person, you hear, that'd be great. And you think, oh, great, I'll see them next week. But the visual person's going, no, you won't. There's something incongruent in that. Why'd they shake their head? Now, if you watch politicians, you'll see them do this all the time. They'll go, I absolutely believe. This is saying the opposite of what they're saying here. So there's incongruence in their system. As coaches, if we can pick that stuff up, we can go, may I just feed back? As you said, you'll see me next week. How aware are you that you shook your head? And you'll find the person usually has no conscious awareness of it. There's no conscious awareness of what this means for them. But when you go, if this was a communication, what's it communicating? And they go, well, actually, I've got a bit of a conflict that's what this was about, unconsciously driving that stuff. So being in control of our verbal and non-verbal communication means that we're congruent in our communicating, which means our system's aligned, which means we're going to become far more influential with others in terms of firing off the right mirror neurons we want to fire off, in getting them to want to model us. And so in coaching, we train people to become professional coaches. We have one main rule, and that is you go first. You have to do the work on you. You have to get congruence in your system. You have to be able to lead what it is you're asking your client to do. You have to be able to model it yourself. And that doesn't mean modeling in the content. That means modeling the process and the structure of the thinking, of the emotions, of the motivation, of the drive, for example. You've got to model the way in which you do that for the client to pick up on it. And then the final bit is what you do and what you don't do. Your power is in what you do, and what you don't do is part of what you do. So now we've got how and what you think that generate your emotions, that drive your verbal, non-verbal communication, whether it's congruent, that drive what you do, how you do it, and how you don't do it. That model there is one of the seminal models in mental skills that when your clients understand that, they can take much more responsibility and accountability for their performance, and they can start to impact the things that increase performance, and they can start to let go of the habits that hold performance back. So questions on that model? How does that land for you, that model? How does that fit for what you do with your clients, what you're doing in your business? How does that fit for your own motivation strategies?
I think it adds just a level of intentionality to things. You know, when we're dealing with high-speed environments, it's really easy to just kind of react quickly all the time everywhere. But being able to be intentional about like, hey, here, I received that bit of feedback or that input from somewhere, and I'm going to evaluate how I handle it and take some time to process it and then hand it back in a strategic way, not in a random way or not in a reactive way.
We call that difference intentionality versus attentionality. Yeah, and attentionality is like what Labradors do. Yeah, you throw a ball, a Labrador's gonna I'm gonna wander down and sniff the perimeter. You throw a ball, and that Labrador's after that ball automatically. It is attentional. It's not intending to chase the ball. It just chases balls down. Whereas intentionality means rather than chasing the balls down, you can align how you respond to that based on your intentions. And so intentionality is everything because it drives through your neurosemantic system the meaning that drives the performance. Nice. And so often we'll say, you know, are you at intentionality? Are you clear about your why? Or are you at attentionality? Are you putting fires out constantly?
Yeah, it's interesting. It feels like in high performance, sometimes you get a high quantity of things and then you're reacting a lot of it. And it feels like, okay, I'm being very high performance, but it's not necessarily intentional high performance, or maybe that's not even high performance at all. Maybe that's just high quantity of performance.
Yeah, it's and that's when in high performance sport, when one team starts to govern the game, even though the other team intended to play a different one, they end up playing their game. And so this team now dictates the whole performance of the game because they've set the frames that the other people are playing. And so that's what we teach teams to do is to be clear about their intentionality and clear about what even reacting looks like from an intentional perspective.
Mm.
And not allowing the other team to set the frame that means you're playing their game. To constantly come back to what's our game? Why are we here? What's most important? What's our intention in the face of that?
Jay, I think they're ready to create an action plan. You guys ready to actually create a plan on all this stuff that you're learning? Ah, I knew you would be. Let's go. Here we go. Let me share this here for you guys. Time to create an action plan.
So, you might not get through this today, but building a high performance action plan means identifying a personal challenge that you may be having or that your client may be having, setting an intentional outcome related to that challenge. And so going, well, there's the challenge. What's my intention in the face of that challenge? What do I intend? What's my meaning for engaging in this? To then develop a strategy that links with that intention. And so there's a simple model comes out of Harvard University with a guy who was a developmentalist, a developmental psychology in the same field that we're in. His name is Bill Tolbert, and he developed a system called developmental action inquiry. And he calls it Bruce Lee's inevitable punch. Bruce Lee was famous for saying, if I want to hit you, you're going to get hit. It's a matter of time. I'll work out your strategy. I'll pull your strategy apart and my punch will get through. And Bruce called it his inevitable punch. So Bill calls this Bruce Lee's inevitable punch, which is to set an intention, to set a strategy, to set then actions, and then set an evaluation criteria. And so it's called triple loop learning. Your intention is what is the most important why? What's the purpose? What's the meaning that's driving everything I'm doing? Your strategy is how you're going to enact that intention. Your actions are how you're going to enact that strategy. And the evaluation is ensuring that the actions are aligned with your strategy. You have to have criteria for being able to measure that, and how your strategy is aligned with your intention. So that if there's misalignment anywhere in that system, it gets picked up really quickly. You then adjust the strategy based on the intention, or you adjust the actions you're taking based on the strategy, and you keep changing either one of those things, or maybe you go back up and you change your actual intention because maybe your intention's unrealistic, for example. And so as we work through creating an action plan, is looking at what's my challenge, setting up an intention for that, developing a strategy for that, a set of actions, and then the most important part is how will you evaluate that those actions are aligned with your strategy, is aligned with your intention, to let you know whether you're on or off course. So each of you can take the challenge that you brought in and you can run it through that action plan model. And we've talked about intentionality, and this is the model that we'll finish on, and it's called the meaning performance model. And you know, in our field, we say meaning drives performance, period. Meaning has different levels. Meaning goes from futile at the lowest level to vital at the highest level. Performance on the lower axis, on the horizontal axis, goes from competence through competence to expertise. And then we have these dimensions that run up the side, and they're different contexts in which we perform. And so we have the context of ourself, We have the context of our power and engaging in that power. We have the context of others and how we connect, relate, and communicate with others. We have the context of time, which is really about priorities. And then we have the context of world, which is multiple contexts in and of themselves. And so we build meaning that drives performance in each of these contexts. And so if we want to change our performance, we've got to either grow our skill and keep moving it from incompetence through competence to expertise. And simultaneously, we've got to be looking at what's our intention, what's the why for engaging in this in the first place. And while we're building that level of skill, we're building the meaning of the intentionality and why it matters for us to be doing what we're doing. When we do both of those things at a high level, we're performing at a level of expertise and it's meaningful for us. That's where real flow or engagement comes from. And so if we want engagement ourselves, if we want our clients to be engaged, we need to help them link their meanings for being here and grow their meanings for doing what they're doing. And then we have to link it to the level of skill that they're building in terms of their competence and expertise. When that happens, they won't need motivating. There'll just be a level of engagement that drives better and better and better performance. And so where performance drops, one of those two things are occurring. Either the meaning and the intentionality is falling out, or they're losing connection with their originating meaning or intentionality, or their skills aren't at the level to be able to handle the level of complexity in terms of what they're engaging in. So usually when I talk with coaches, it's about troubleshooting. Is this a meaning issue? Or is this a performance expertise competence issue? Where do you think, or is it both? Because either of those, if I have high levels of meaning but low levels of competence, I'm going to be overwhelmed. If I have high levels of competence but low levels of meaning, I'm going to be underwhelmed. I'm going to become bored and probably burn out. And so that model is, when we talk about intentionality, that's what we actually mean in terms of building that intentionality. So if we look back at then your performance plan, if you want to build intentionality, what are you looking at doing? Why is it important to you? What are the skills you've got to close? And how can you build more meaningfulness into what it is you're doing? How can you connect with why it really matters for you? When you do that, you'll then be able to much more easily create a strategy which will lead you towards your outcome and lead you to engage in the actions through choice, even if those actions are difficult or complex, because there's a level of meaningfulness and because we have some competence in navigating that. Even the stuff we don't enjoy doing becomes enjoyable because we're choosing it. And then it's about the actions, and then it's about how we evaluate that stuff. So what will you be taking away from your time together with us today? What's one thing that stands out for you today? Because you've traded your heartbeats with us, yeah? Your heartbeats is the ultimate commodity. You've traded your heartbeats with us. What did you get for the trade, if anything?
3 pages of solid notes for me.
That understanding that you've got to, check your own bias internally and focus on your client and focus on what they're experiencing. That's been one of my biggest challenges is, I have a degree in anthropology and I've got a, certification, all this, no, the client doesn't care about any of that stuff. They care about how I can help them in their, in their world. And this is helping me focus on that immensely. Thank you.
Yeah, good, Linda. It'd be like going into, a Ferrari showroom and the salesperson talking you through every part and where it's from and what it does. You'd go, stop. I want to get in and drive it. I want to know what the Ferrari can do. I don't want to know how it's built and how it was put together. I want to know how it performs. That's your client as well.
Thank you.
Noah, you're muted.
Well, like Tobias always says, it's always about what the solution is, not the benefits. Who cares about when people are talking about different things about a watch or whatever? It's all about what is the client going to get out of it, not about all the benefits that are extra add-ons.
Benefits, not the features. Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good point, Noah. Yeah, you don't need to list 100 different features of your program. It's that they want to know what's in it for them. That's it. Like, what is this going to do for me? Mm-hmm. Good. I love it. How about you, Anita? We haven't heard from you much. What's one takeaway from today?
Oh, wow. I've taken a lot of notes here. It's pretty much how we assign meaning in our brains, and the way we assign meaning is whether or not we're gonna take action. It's either a motivator or not a motivator for someone.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Good.
We often say, Anita, that people talk about needing motivation, and the first thing we do is go, well, you probably don't need more motivation. It's probably how you're motivating yourself that matters. And so when we get into, okay, tell us about how you're feeling demotivated, it's actually the way in which the person's processing that's creating the demotivation. So we don't need to motivate them out of that. We need to look at how they're demotivating themselves. And usually that's away from what they don't want, which is an away from motivation strategy, which is what our emotions are designed to do. And then helping them turn that into a toward motivation that motivates them toward what they do want, because it's a much more long-term, powerful way.
Absolutely.
Lovely. Well, it's been lovely to spend some time. Yeah. We do have an offer for you if you are interested in this stuff. We run a 12-week program, and that's at what time would that be in the US, in different parts of the US, Tarek?
So that's starting February the 5th, which is Australian time, 4 p.m. I think at the moment it's roughly, depending on where in the US, anywhere between 15 to 17 hours east of Greenwich. So you'd be a day or 16, 17 hours behind. But suffice to say that the sessions are recorded. You will get access to the learning management system if you can't attend to them live. So they're well worth it. They're 2 hours each session, and they go over 12 weeks. So it's quite a deep immersion with Jay and I. And there's lots of materials, lots of resources that we provide for each of those sessions. So imagine this, what we went through here, and times that by 100, if you like. It goes a lot deeper, and it's a curriculum that we follow. So that's pretty much the program in brief. You can scan the QR code, and the price actually on the QR code is in Australian dollars. So it's good news for you guys. It just means you need to convert it. So it is far less than what we've advertised it for within this page. So if you were to scan it, there's options to go on a payment plan, which we don't put any sort of, maybe a bit extra for that. But yeah, come and join us, guys. It'd be awesome to have some of you be with us for that 3 months. There's some bonus materials. You do get 20% off as well. That's reflected in the QR code landing page for that 5th of February intake. So hope you all enjoyed it as I did.
Lovely to spend some time with you. Thank you for coming. Heartbeats.
Yeah, yes. I had a wonderful time, you guys. This was amazing. Jay, Tarek, thank you so much for your time, for your expertise. And hopefully you guys think about these things deeply and you guys use these as that action plan and like put them into work. So now when you're dealing with clients, you think about it from a different perspective, right? So it'll help you coach your clients more effectively. And if you need like a deeper, understanding of all that, like I said, join the mental skills training for coaches, and they go super deep in there. So it's a great program for you guys if you guys want to get more help in that regards. So you guys, thank you so much for tuning in. And then all of you guys will also get emailed the whole social media calendar as well in the weekly content machine. So you guys will get that as some added bonuses for being here. So thank you so much for being here. If you guys need anything else, reach out. Jay, Tarek, how can they get in touch with you if they have any other questions or anything, or they just want to follow you guys?
For me, you could find me on LinkedIn or Functional Training Institute through the socials, or at FTI Global, Tarek Michael-Chouja on LinkedIn. I suppose, Tobias, we could send them some more information to sort of follow us. Jay, what about yourself?
So if you follow the QR code previous, it'll take you to Tarek's site, and then you'll be able to make contact through Tarek's site as well. That's probably the easiest way.
Awesome.
And Tobias, thanks for facilitating, if I can say that. You're a champion, Tobias. And appreciate the platform, and for those who stayed the course.